Hello and welcome to a Saturday night edition of Chess with Simon. It is 11:33. Am I out at a celebrity party? I am not. Am I relaxing, watching Netflix, or even going to sleep? I am not. I am analysing Alexandra Kosteniuk versus Peter Leko as part of our quest to understand the whole of chess. And we are looking at the Italian opening. So this much we have looked at in previous videos. Pawn e4, pawn e5, allowing development and seizing the centre. Knight f3 attacks the pawn e5, knight c6 defends it. Bishop c4 targets the weak f7 square, bishop c5 also coming to the classical square. Pawn c3 prepares d4. Knight f6 from Leko. I mean, I just want to say, by the way, these two players, they're absolutely amazing players. Kosteniuk, women's world champion, former women's world champion, and also a Grandmaster, someone I've followed for years and years and years. Peter Leko is one of the historic greats of chess, came within a heartbeat of becoming world champion. His commentary on the Meltwater Cup is absolutely fantastic, and also his style is wonderful. His positional intuition and his approach to the game is wonderful. His professionalism is amazing. So knight f6 from Leko, a solid positional player. d4 from Kosteniuk, takes. This was played in the Tal Memorial Blitz, which is the same tournament that Kosteniuk Tomaszewski, which is the previous video, was taken from. I guess this was Kosteniuk's repertoire for this tournament, and it's produced some beautiful games actually. So pawn d4, check here. White puts the bishop in the way. Black's taken on d2. By the way, putting the bishop in the way is not the only move in this position. We will look at other moves later in the series. No, not queen d2. We will look at other moves later in the series. Knight c3 we will discuss. Bishop takes, knight takes on d2. So this allows d5. White exchanges. And then we looked at queen b3 in the very first video. But this does allow knight a5, which is heading towards a draw after queen a4 check, knight c6. So Kosteniuk's castling. Leko's doing the same thing. She plays rook c1, which is a very sensible move because in some lines, black is taking twice on d4. That pawn on d4 is weak. It's an isolated queen's pawn. And in some lines, black's taking twice. And then if the bishop has moved away, which sometimes it's on b3, perhaps after a move like knight b6, the bishop ends up on b3. Then if black takes twice on d4, white can be taking on c7 because the queen's no longer defending c7, and actually white's a little bit better in those lines. So rook c1 is the most commonly played move, just sticking the rook on the half-open file. Leko, always well prepared, thoughtful player. Pawn h6, just taking away the g5 square for the white knight particularly, creating some luft for the king. This has only been played twice before in history, but it's a very solid, sensible move. The other players have played rook e1 here, just sort of taking that e-file, but Kosteniuk chooses knight b3, which defends that weak d-pawn 3 times with both knights and the queen. Leko immediately seizes the e-file, since white has chosen not to. His positional instincts are very strong. So Kosteniuk's switching to a new strategy now. She's pinning that knight against the rook and attacking it twice with the bishop and the rook. So Peter Leko defends it with his knight. Now this is a complex strategy because it looks like white has a3 here. But then black doesn't move the knight away after a3. Black will play a6. So if white takes on c6, black can take back with the b4 knight. So Kosteniuk instead chose to intensify the pin with knight e5, attacking that knight on c6 3 times, and Leko's picked up the pawn on a2. Actually, when I first looked at this, I thought, can't the bishop take on c6 here? Because although the c1 rook's attacked, that would then attack the rook on e8. And actually, that is the engine choice. That's what Stockfish chooses here. But Alexandra Kosteniuk chose to play rook c5, which is a more solid move, just keeping up the pressure on c6. Leko comes back to defend. White takes. black takes, and then bishop a4. I don't know if you could spot a better move for white in this position, or if you could see what the problem is. But there's a problem. It's quite subtle. There's a problem with bishop a4. So please feel free to pause the video, or perhaps you can just see it, or whatever. I mean, this was played in a blitz game between two amazing players, so if you can see it, that's pretty impressive this quickly. So, brilliant move by Leko, bishop a6. Exploiting that diagonal which the white bishop has moved off, and now hitting the rook. And if the rook moves to e1, then black takes, white takes back with the queen, and then knight d3 is forking the rook and the queen. So this is basically winning an exchange. Kosteniuk chooses not to do the predictable move and to confuse matters. Black picks up a rook, white picks up the knight there. Then, this is clever by Leko, instead of just immediately rescuing the bishop, he hits the queen with the rook, so there's no time for the bishop to escape. Sorry, there's no time for white to take the bishop. So there's no time for white to take on f1, because the black rook would take on b4. And of course, queen takes b8 doesn't work, because you've got to sack the queen for a rook and a bishop. So white's just moving the queen, but at this point it's basically over. I mean, in other words, black's just winning this, and someone as solid as Peter Leko is not going to let this go. Bishop b5 pretty much forces the exchange of bishops, and again the rook's on a nice square here. Kosteniuk sensibly creates an escape square for the king, but Leko's just swapping off the rook. Actually, that knight's quite nice on c5. It's I think it's what Nimzovich called an outpost. It's pretty hard to remove, but the issue really is just that white is an exchange and a pawn down, which is easily enough. Beautiful centralised queen on d5, can't really be removed without swapping the queens. Kosteniuk plays knight b3, but then queen e4 is threatening queen e1 check, which will swap the queens, and that really will be the end of the game. So Alexandra Kosteniuk puts the knight in the way to stop the exchange, and also to hit the queen, as it happens. Queen e1 check, king runs, and then that's another pawn gone. So black's two pawns and an exchange up, and that is enough for Alexandra Kosteniuk. She's a good enough player to know that that's over. I mean, for instance, rook e2 doesn't look very pleasant, hitting the knight and threatening checkmate on g2, but the material's overwhelming anyway. But you know, really fascinating game, and we've seen two sides of the Italian with two Kosteniuk games. In the first game, she won with a brilliant kingside attack. In this game, the black defence was really solid, and Kosteniuk just fell, unfortunately, to a tactic, which was interesting because the tactic actually all revolved around this e-file, because if she had taken the e-file with her rook, then the rook wouldn't have got caught like that on f1, and the fact that black had control of the e-file meant that any attempt to put the rook on there would have allowed black to swap and then allows this fork. So actually the control of the e-file by black was critical, and this is a classic example where the positional factors just build up to lead to these combinations. You know, a good combination flows from a superior position. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed that. It's 20-12. It's the best way to spend a Saturday night, and I will see you all soon.